Welcome back to another edition of the Big Nick Energy Podcast. Make sure to like, share, subscribe, and comment on everywhere you can find our podcast. We have a very special guest again today, returning BJ Bass, NBA agent and founder of the RBA Showcase. BJ, how you doing this offseason now that it's officially started?
Good, guys. Thanks for having me.
We're glad you're on, that's for sure. And now, as an agent of players that are trying to get drafted or free agents trying to get into the league, we're saying off season. Tell me this is not like where your playoffs basically begin.
No, it is. I mean, this is the craziest time of year leading up to summer league, and obviously free agency starts July 1st, and then summer league is the 7th, and so it's a lot of activity, and teams trying to figure out their roster for next season. So you have to be on top of all that stuff. You have to know where the moving pieces are so that you can put your guys in place.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you're very experienced in this now. We want to jump right into it. So we have a couple names that you gave us prior that we want to talk about. One of the guys is named Colbey Ross. He's 24 years old. He played for Pallacanestro Varese last year in the Liga Basket Serie A league, which is Italy's #1 league. It's their version of the NBA.
Yep.
I would say Italy's like the fourth or fifth, like third or fourth best league in the world, correct?
Yeah, it's a great league. Very tough competition. Absolutely. Yeah. Yep.
So Colbey, also just to tee it up real quick, he played in Pepperdine. He became the first NCAA D1 player to get 2,200 points, and assists, 400 rebounds. Very good college career. But BJ, I think the real amazingness that people are going to find out from a guy that is going to go and get in summer league somewhere and then probably get real NBA minutes next year. What did this dude do in Italy last year? Can you let everyone know?
It's really incredible. It's Colbey Ross is a historic NCAA player. So you mentioned the numbers. He had 2,200 plus, 800 plus assists, 400 plus rebounds. Nobody in the history of the NCAA has ever done that. So Colbey Ross was a guy that was definitely on the NBA radar coming out in the draft a couple years ago. And frankly, he's just improved. He's an incredible worker. He's continued to get better and better. Rookie year, we had him in Basketball Champions League. He played with Nymburk in the Basketball Champions League, which is a great platform for a rookie. And then last summer, he played Summer League with the Trailblazers, who won the Summer League championship. They actually beat the Knicks. In fact, the Blazers beat the Knicks in the championship game. And Colbey was a huge part of the Blazers' run last summer. He was the backup PG to Brandon Williams, who I think was also up with Westchester for a minute. But he was huge because Portland started each game kind of going down 10, 12 points. And Colbey would come in and he would change the pace and change the tempo. One game he put the pace up. The other game he pulled the pace down. He just understands what needs to happen.
So he was 2020 Derrick Rose, basically.
He was so good, and he started to draw obviously more NBA interest, and then he started to get real interest from high level teams in Europe. And what happened last summer is Michael Arcieri, who was in the Knicks front office and a friend of mine for a long time, he went over to be the GM of this team of Varese in Italy. And he loved Colbey, and he brought over a coach, Matt Brazzi, who has been around the league and coached in the G League with the Rockets. And he was an assistant coach on Chauncey Billups' staff in Portland during Summer League when Colbey was there. So he got to know Colbey in Summer League. And then when he went to Varese, he wanted to bring Colbey with him. So that was kind of the foundation. We also sent Tariq Owens, who was a big high flyer, played at St. John's and Texas Tech. So we put Kolb together with Tariq. So we had our point guard, we had our lob catcher, and they were just incredible, man. They were a real dynamic duo. Colbey ended up being the best player in Italy this season. He had his #1 in eval. He averaged like 18, 6, and 5. I mean, he shot 50, 40, 85 or something close to that. So he just had an incredible year. But for him to go over at 24 years old and win an MVP in that league, that you're right. The next step is now we have to find the right spot for him to get rotational minutes.
In
Yeah.
case anyone was wondering, also Wayne Selden and Shabazz Napier play in this league.
Right. So
Yeah,
no,
it's serious competition. I mean, he beat out Marco Bellinelli. The finalists for
Oh wow.
for MVP were Colbey, Bellinelli. Yeah, which he beat out Bellinelli in Italy. Like, you're doing something right. So
that's awesome.
no, Colby's an amazing kid. I shouldn't say kid. He's an amazing guy. And he's a point guard. He's a throwback. He's a true floor general. And I know we all probably grew up watching Mark Jackson and Rod Strickland, and there's when you understand what a point guard can do in terms of dribble penetration, making it easier for everybody else, getting guys easy looks, making everybody else better. Okay. And that's what Colbey does. He's not one of these prototypical 6'5", thoroughbreds that jumps over the backboard and dunks on people. Like, he's not Jaden Ivey, but you know what he did? He locked up Jaden Ivey last summer when they played, and he led Portland while Jaden was like figuring things out. So, to me, it's just sort of fundamental basketball. If you have a guy with the ball in his hands that can make it easier for everybody else, you're going to elevate your team.
Absolutely.
Sure. Yeah. Kind of what you alluded to before. He's not playing with any slouches over there. Shabazz Napier is NBA talent. Obviously, once a Knick, always a Knick. Wayne Selden as well. Now, you did allude earlier to Michael Arcieri being the GM of the Italian team that Ross had come from. For those who don't know, again, I'll re-mention it. He was the director of basketball strategy with the Knicks from 2017 to 2020. I'd imagine probably when the front office switch happened with Leon Rose leaving, Leon Rose coming in and kind of getting rid of a bunch of guys, he may have, kind of caught the boot in that exchange. But I'm sure there's still people within the organization who have relationships with Arcieri. So, I mean, Knicks fans want to know, is there a chance of this guy, do you think obviously the Knicks don't have a pick this year. Could they potentially buy? Do you think they could buy a pick to get this guy in the building, or maybe,
well, he's a free agent, right? He already won past his draft eligibility.
Is a free agent.
What's that?
They would just sign Colbey, or they would just sign Colbey. But yeah, I think. Look, I mean, obviously McBride is here behind Brunson. Is there an opportunity here? Could they use some depth at that position? Absolutely.
Sure.
I hear things are going very well up at camp. So we'll see. We'll see what they have to say.
Yeah. It just sounds to me that he probably provides. While, listen, Deuce McBride is a hell of a defender. He has a very limited offensive skill set. Whereas Colbey, you mentioned already, he's pretty. He holds his own on the defensive end of the court, but he's also a dynamo on offense. Just from the highlights that I was able to watch, great shooter. As you mentioned before, very effective in dribble penetration, getting to the cup, so on and so forth. He seems like he does have a little bit higher of a ceiling, especially on the offensive side. Maybe, listen, this might be a busy offseason, so if there's a few names that go out in trades, and maybe we bring this guy in as like a third kind of point guard off the bench, and we kind of see where that goes from there initially. Yeah.
I think it's a couple things. I think Colby's got so much better. I mean, he was amazing. Like I said, he made history in the NCAA, but every year he's worked and he's developed. And like this year, even from Vegas last year, his body right now is absolutely incredible. And he's able to play through more contact and absorb more contact. And so he's just taken a quantum leap in terms of like his development. But also, a lot of teams, the way the salary cap, you need guys that can play that'll be on like the vet minimum. You need cheap labor. And so, Colbey is in high demand. He's not going to come in from Italy and grab a max contract. He's going to come in probably on a vet minimum. But if you can get a backup point guard that can really play on a vet minimum, and then you can spend your money somewhere else, that's a pretty good feather in your cap.
Yeah, no, it sounds exciting. And listen, if there are any ties with the Knicks front office and this guy has a possibility, trust me, if he gets signed to the Knicks, we're going to have you back on. That's for damn sure.
For sure.
Yeah. The other guy that you mentioned before we get into the other handful of guys that you also have kind of in your stable, Brandon Randolph. He's a 25-year-old guy. played a couple seasons in college for Arizona, I believe. And then he also played for the Austin Spurs of the G League last year. He averaged over 19 per game. And he's also a Yonkers resident. So shout out local guys. You know, that's
Yonkers.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, tell us.
I hit up Frank as soon as we signed Brandon. We signed Brandon a few months ago, and the great guy, local guy, just went up and met with him and his parents, and that Arizona team, that was the Ayton, Rolly Alkins, like that was a super talented team. So like Brandon was a 5-star guy, like he was right there. In fact, as a rookie, he was very close with Milwaukee, and he had an ACL in summer league, and like he was right on the doorstep as a rookie. And so he had to take the second year, and kind of rehab and get himself. And then this past year, he came back, and the Spurs traded for him to put him in the G League. And that should kind of tell you something also. If Milwaukee takes you and then San Antonio takes you, like those guys both have a pretty good track record of finding guys. So the fact that he went to San Antonio, averaged 20 a game, and now he's on the circuit, and what I'm hearing is that he's just absolutely killing. Like he went to Utah, he had a great free agent camp, all positive. He went to Dallas last week and was apparently awesome. Like they offered him summer league right away, like literally an hour after the camp. Matt Riccardi called me, and now he's up there in Westchester, and and I got really good feedback yesterday from Frank on him. He's long. I think that he has really great potential defensively as a wing, as a switchability guy. I think that's totally untapped. People look at him as a scorer because he's a lights out shooter at 6'5". He's all of 6'5", probably has a 7-foot span. So he's got all the wing length, and he is a really skilled player. He's a scorer, but he puts it on the floor better than people thought. Like that's the feedback I got last week from Dallas. Like we didn't know he could really put it on the floor like that. So again, where does he fit in with the Knicks right now? Like who knows? I mean, they don't have their picture filled out yet. So it's hard for me to say like Brandon's going to walk in, but I called Frank right away. I said, I have this great guy that we just signed. He's in Yonkers. Like, can we get him into this camp, number one? But also this summer, like he's right there. He's 10 minutes away. So when you guys open the gym and you start running with your guys coming back into town, he's a perfect guy. He's an excellent guy, and he's an excellent player. And those are the type of guys they want hanging around the gym.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. Kind of to what you were mentioning before, you have these guys that are like, kind of play 2, 3, 4, like combo wings, so to say. And a very necessary skill set is their ability to kind of put the ball on the floor now more than ever, really. You look at like the Jason Tatums of the world, for example. He's a perfect example in that regard. The one question I did have, so you mentioned he played at Arizona with Ayton, so obviously he crossed paths with Alonzo Trier as well.
I think so. I think the first year Trier was there. Yeah, I think so.
Awesome.
Hey, they're loaded, man. They always have major talent out there. There's a handful of schools that get the top guys.
They're definitely part of it. And they win one championship and then get knocked down the first, second round every year. So I mean, it's either all or nothing.
Right. Hey, it's tough, man. It's that tournament, it's tough to get to the Final Four every year.
One and done will always lend itself to some craziness. BJ, you actually mentioned it a little bit before when you were talking about Colbey, and I wanted to ask you, because you are an agent for guys that are going to be trying to fill out the fringes of rosters. And now that the CBA is going up, but it's also changing a lot, where there's the penalties that were already strict are more strict for teams that go over the luxury tax threshold if they do it for multiple years in a row, etc. Can you explain just the overall what's going to be a necessity now, where teams before, like 11 through 15, were guys they wouldn't necessarily have to use, they could like pay them vet minimums and stuff, but how much more important it is now to get like free agents that were never in the league before, or get undrafted guys and have them be actual contributors? Because for anyone that doesn't know what the CBA is doing in the next couple of years and starting this year, they might not understand that like their 12th man is a guy that's going to play that they might have never heard of before.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. You're right. And I think that, like I said, teams are going to have to fill out their rosters on the back end with vet minimum guys. And, listen, every club is different. Some teams, their two-way guys play a lot. Some teams, their two-way guys barely ever see the court. It depends kind of, where they are in the playoff mix on the ladder. And are they a team with championship aspiration, or are they a development team, And so it kind of all depends on, where they are in the life cycle, let's say, in terms of how deep they go on the bench. But I mean, look at Denver. They played 8 guys, and they got it done. And it's one of the concerns I had, people, we were talking before the series, and the one, Denver doesn't have a really deep bench right now, but you know what? They got it done with 8 or 9 guys. I mean, Reggie played a few minutes. It was basically Bruce Brown, Christian Brown, and Jeff Green, right?
Yep.
And so, and they took it the whole distance. So yes, you're right in terms of the financial. I mean, the penalties for going over the aprons and the luxury tax are significant, and some owners don't care. They blow through it, and that's their approach. And other teams are very, very careful. I mean, some teams like Oklahoma City didn't even make it to the floor, right? So they didn't even spend. There's a floor that you have to spend, and if you don't spend up to the floor, then at the end of the season, you basically have to take the delta of, the difference between what you spent and the floor, and dole that out to your team. So either way, you have to get to the floor, but it just shows that it's a wide spectrum of how teams approach this thing.
Every team just needs Nikola Jokic or Giannis, and then they'll all be okay. If only.
Yeah, that's it.
A second round pick, man. Think about that. A second round pick.
The Knicks famously took Cleanthony early, 1 pick prior to Nikola Jokic.
But for all the times we ever do that about Knicks players, like they took Obi Toppin over MPJ. That seems more hurting to me personally. But
Kevin Knox.
everyone took someone over Nikola Jokic.
Yeah.
BJ, before we actually move on to the whole you putting your Knicks GM thinking cap on, anyone else that we should be looking out for name wise for Summer League this year? Undrafted rookies, or free agents that are coming in from overseas or anywhere?
Well, the 2 guys up there, Colbey and Brandon, are really good guys to keep, on the radar. The other kid going up this week is Khalid Moore. And Khalid is a kid, also Elmont, New York, Long Island. Great kid, and had a really good season at Fordham. And Fordham, if you ever have been up there, I think is like a sleeping giant. It's Rose Hill is such a fun place to go. And so Fordham was 22-7 this year. Khalid was a kid that played high school ball at Malloy and then went to Georgia Tech. So he followed like the Kenny Anderson, Malloy, Georgia Tech blueprint, and he won an ACC championship at Georgia Tech. And he's another one of these guys. He's a 6'7" wing, really long, high motor player. Doesn't have huge numbers, but just incredible defensive wing who makes winning plays, and an amazing kid. And I called Walt Perrin, who is the director of scouting, college scouting, and sets up the draft schedule. And I told him, I said, I think Khalid, first of all, he's a local kid, which is always great, but I think he can be a really good culture guy for Westchester, as, incredibly hard worker in practice, high motor, winning player. And so Walt is bringing him in Friday for a draft workout. And I would love to get him up in Westchester this year.
That'd be awesome. It's always cool to have homegrown talent too. It's kind of crazy to know that the way the NBA used to work in the 50s, 60s, that they would actually prefer you to draft guys that were closer to your home.
Yeah.
And then they started spanning out when the NBA merger happened.
Yeah. And then I think there was a time where like the Knicks didn't want anybody from here because, there are issues that come up with just being home and having a million people around you, and the pressure or whatever off the court, type of stuff. And I always feel like, if you can bring in more local guys that, the fans can get engaged with, right? 100%. I mean, I always felt like all things being equal, like why not? But the 3 guys I mentioned, Colbey, Brandon, and Khalid, they're like great guys. I mean, they're really good basketball players, but they're great people. And, that's who we're trying to work with. Because honestly, if you don't have that, you're not going to make it. People are going to figure you out. You're going to rub people the wrong way at some point. And it's human nature, man. Coach got to like you, and
100%.
front office people got to like you and want you to do well. And so we're trying to put forward really good people, but also really good players.
Love that.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, just to kind of shift focus, because obviously you're definitely a Knicks fan. Specifically of one guy that I want to kind of touch on with you. You and I talk privately, relatively often, especially during the playoffs. I think we were communicating pretty heavily, and you're one of the biggest advocates of RJ Barrett, right? You've specifically spoken very highly of his playmaking abilities, and how you think that there's a lot to tap into there that the Knicks really haven't. Now, everybody that followed RJ from Duke into the league know that he was a much bigger playmaker at the collegiate level than he has been so far as a Knick. I mean, aside from just college, right? I want to make this a little bit harder for you to answer. Aside from just what you saw in college, what exactly is it that you've seen from him so far in the 4 years that he's been in the league that makes you think that the Knicks are leaving a bit on the table when it comes to RJ?
Well, I think that, like I said to you, I love homegrown guys. I feel like there's definitely something to continuity and developing players. And for all the reasons we just talked about, in terms of having some local guys and fans can really get behind. So I would be inclined to always err on the side of keeping your homegrown talent, especially a kid that has shown development every year, right? And not just season by season, but even in a particular game. I mean, RJ will come out and he'll throw up a 1 for 7 in the first half, and you say this is going to be a terrible game, and then he comes right back and he figures it out, and he helps the team in the second half. He has a tendency to do that. In terms of just like on the court, I think that if you look at the teams that are making the deepest runs, the ball is moving. The ball is moving, and it makes it much more difficult. The defenses are so locked in at this point of the playoffs, right? And you have to have diversity. You have to be able. I mean, look, I love Brunson, and I said this to you, Brad. Like, I could watch him all day, but like, there's a certain style there where he's dribbling, kind of probing and dribbling around and getting into his shot late in the shot clock. Well, you know what? That's going to work to an extent. But if you don't have something else to go to in that really crunch spot, it makes it so much easier on the defense. So I'm not saying take the ball out of Brunson's hands in any way. I'm just saying as a compliment to that, right? To utilize more when you go there and you watch them, and if you're lucky enough to watch it up close, the first thing that jumps out is RJ. I mean, Julius is obviously a horse also, but RJ, that's a big boy, and he can move. And when he starts going downhill, you say, so wow, who's going to get in front of that, right? So my thing is, run some actions to get him going downhill. With Mitch, we saw it a few times in the playoffs, the few times that they got in that pick and roll, and he can see it. He can make the lob pass. I think the next step is for him dribble, penetrate, kick to the corner, which he does. But like, we all saw it at Duke, and he's got to develop that. But the pick and roll stuff, I mean, for me, he's the best lob thrower they have right now.
I always say, I'm going to cut you off real quick. I always say RJ, really quick, please. You continue, please. RJ's favorite pass is the lob to Mitch. Like, that's his favorite pass to make on the court. It's his best, it's his most accurate, and it just always looks pretty. But please continue.
And guess what? He's getting downhill. He's drawing defense. He's drawing heat. So it's right there. And what higher percentage shot is there than Mitch catching it a foot above? But you got to throw the right pass. Everybody can't do that. And the Knicks have had guys that can't do that. And so that whole part of your game where you could get an easy bucket is kind of, off the table. So again, my thing is like, look, defensively, he has the potential to be a real wing stopper where you could say, RJ, look, it's the NBA. Guys are going to score. Okay, you're not going to stop anybody at this level. But RJ, at least on the wing, can make it difficult. And I think that's where his biggest strength is. Like, go guard the best player on the other team and make it difficult for them. And then offensively, I think I said last time, like, look, I think the shot will continue to improve. I think his numbers will continue to tick up. But, like, again, I don't need him shooting 8 to 10 threes a game.
Right.
2 to 4, like 2 to 4 threes, and then a focus more on driving, passing, finishing at the rim, getting to the free throw line 7, 8, 9, 10 times a game. When you start doing that, everything else takes care of itself. All of a sudden, when you're at the line 8 times a game, like, you're going to get 20. You're going to get 20. He's going to get 7, 8 rebounds, 4, 5 assists. If he's doing that as not your first guy, I mean, he could be your second or third guy even.
Right.
That's a pretty good haul from that spot. So I would leave it and let it continue to develop. But I also know that, he's been in trade talks, and I guess that's a possibility.
Yeah.
That is, I don't even know if you could have planned the segue for me any better by saying he's been in trade talks, but that could be a possibility. Because the next question I had for you, BJ, actually involves, I'm not saying it involves trading RJ, but it does involve a couple names that have been showing up on the trade block for the Knicks this offseason as the quote unquote big names available, even though none of them are like superstars. But if you had to pick one of Zach Lavine, Bradley Beal, Karl Anthony Towns, or OG Anunoby to be the number one target for the Knicks for this offseason, who would you pick out of those 4 names and why?
Well, I would pick Towns. I think Towns is just the best player of the group and has the most potential impact. But let me say one more thing real quick, if I could, about RJ. One more point.
Oh yeah,
and we talk about guys being good guys. And I don't know RJ personally, but all the reports are that, like, I mean, he's an amazing guy. Obviously we know his father played at St. John's. There's a lineage there. But you look at the guys that were drafted, and I know that, like, Knicks were crushed that they got the 3rd pick. But Zion can't stay healthy. As incredible a talent as he is, he can't get his weight right. He can't stay healthy. He's got all kinds of other issues. And Ja is a mess right now. I mean, he's an incredible talent. We actually went and saw him at Murray State, and because we actually recruited a kid from the OVC when he was there, Terry Taylor. And so Ja's been on our radar, but, like, you can't have that. Like, you can't have your second pick. First pick never plays. Second pick's got all kinds of issues. The one thing about RJ, I mean, maybe he doesn't have the talent that those guys have, but you know what? You're getting production. So anyway, so that was my last point about RJ.
He shows up to work every day, and that's all you can ask for.
Yeah, he's a worker. He's going to get better. He's not going to get worse. He's just going to get better. The question is, what's his ceiling, and can he be part of a championship mix? So we'll see. Of the guys you mentioned, I mean, look, Towns is an incredible. I mean, Towns has Hall of Fame talent, and he's a big, and he can give you so many different things on the court. He can score in the post. He can stretch it. He's so strong. I don't think people realize, like, how big and strong this kid is. Like, if he, had a super high motor, I think he could probably even do more on the offensive glass. I think somebody like Tibbs would probably get that out of him. The other guys you mentioned, they're all really good scorers. I mean, Beal is, what can you say? I mean, he's probably one of the best shooters in the league. Zach Lavine could be electric, but you can, I don't want to say you can find those guys everywhere, but you can find those guys. Towns is a guy it's tough to find all that stuff in one package.
So if you were to make a deal for Karl Anthony Towns, I don't know if you can actually talk about this since you're an agent or not, but, like, what would you imagine the hypothetical trade scenario would be for Towns to go to the Knicks?
I don't know. I mean, Randall probably has to go, right? I mean, just for salary. It's a tough one. I would have to, it's tough to just put stuff together from scratch. But, like, I think that if you told me that there was a package where you could send Randall out and bring Towns in, I think that you'd have such a better floor balance, because right now you have Jalen and RJ and Randall, and you have 3 lefties that kind of like to dribble, And, it's just a lot of overlap and a lot of repetition. And I loved them last year. I mean, I told Brad, I'm a huge Villanova guy, huge Jay Wright guy. I love that Leon is kind of making us like Nova North, I mean, because these guys are champs.
It's a winning culture.
They're winning players, incredible culture. They're workers. They have onions. I mean, we've seen Jalen, like he loves the big spot. So I love the team, but the style of play with getting it to the end of the shot clock, pounding the ball, I just think if they added a guy if they swapped in a Towns for a Randall, obviously they have to give out more to make that happen. But I just think in terms of like a starting five, you would just be so much more balanced.
Yeah.
I mean, Mitch would probably have to go also.
I was going to say, even in the scenario of Towns taking Randall's spot, my main problem before you go, Brad, I'm sorry. RJ Randall, like they want to get to similar spots. Like you said, they are both lefties, obviously. Mitch shrinks the floor a lot. And that's always been a problem, like with the way Tibbs runs offense and the way that he wants the defensive anchor in there all the time. To have a guy that shrinks the floor that much, that has to stay only in the dunker spot, only go for offensive rebounds, and then shoots below 50% from the line. Like in my dream world, I would actually keep Randall somehow and get rid of, like, Mitch is part of the major deal for Towns, and Towns becomes your 5. And if he doesn't want to play 5, you play Hartenstein a little bit more in various scenarios, and he plays back up 4, like just to get his 35, 40 minutes. But I'm just not a proponent of RJ and Randall always on the floor together and then Mitch shrinking the floor when they already want to go to the same place.
Right.
I love Mitch. I love Mitch. I think you're right. I think that it's easier when you have a stretch big and you have wings that are trying to get to the hoop. But I think that we had to give Mitch credit because there's another guy that's worked. I mean, if you remember what he looked like coming in, he completely changed his body. If you watched him in the playoffs this year and you just looked at his like bottom half, he filled out so much that it looks almost like Andre Drummond.
Yeah.
And this kid was a stick coming in.
Yeah.
So he's worked hard. He's definitely gotten better. I love a kid that has a relentless motor. I just love guys that are just you on every possession, you have to figure out where he is and get him off the offensive glass. And I can always find a role for a guy like that. But at the same time, and also that he's theirs. They drafted him.
Yep.
And it gets back to what we're talking about. He's another kid that they've kind of developed. And so if they can find a way to make it work, I would love to keep Mitch because I think, rim protection, lob catching, offensive glass motor, those are championship traits and skills. And if you look at especially these playoffs, I mean, offensive rebounding, look how many games that were won, even like, Derek White everything.
Yeah.
Almost every game, the offensive rebounding was a huge part of that. So I'd love to find a way to make it work, but I also think you're right. It's hard to attack the rim when the paint is clogged.
Yeah.
Yeah. The problem with Mitch with me is that a lot of times, and I'm sure Joey would agree with me here, a lot of times it's like we're playing 4-on-5 on offense, because he's really just a net negative on that side
until
of the
the
ball.
shot goes up, basically.
Until the shot goes up, and then obviously he's super effective. But until that moment, it's literally playing 4-on-5, and that's kind of the problem. We just watched, to your point before, BJ, we just watched Karl Anthony Towns play next to Rudy Gobert, and that would kind of just be the same thing. So obviously it would have to be moving Cat back to the 5 and then getting rid of Mitch, unfortunately. A couple of things that you said to me kind of stood out because I've been a huge proponent of, I think Zach Lavine would be a perfect fit. And reasons being is because he's a 3-level scorer, right? He's actually a lot better. First off, the one negative on his name for a few years is that he hasn't been healthy. He's actually been relatively healthy for a few years now, right? But on top of that, he's actually a whole lot better of a defender than people make him out to be statistically. From an advanced analytics standpoint, he was actually obviously he's a better scorer than RJ Barrett today, but he was actually better defensively as well. If we're going to stick with Tom Thibodeau as the coach, I just think that you need guys that can kind of create off the dribble for themselves and would thrive in an isolation offense, which a Zach Lavine would. Now, this does bring me to my prior point, though. Karl Anthony Towns is really bad defensively. You know, he's a good rebounder. He's great. I mean, he has all the intangibles and tools that you want in a 5 from an offensive standpoint, but he's just bad defensively. Now, as much as I was against the idea of Karl Anthony Towns prior to 5 minutes ago, I'm kind of coming around to it. And the reason being is because, kind of to what you alluded to earlier, BJ, like he's just an offensive dynamo on that end of the floor. You know who else is an absolute liability on defense, but is tremendous offensively? I'm not saying the two are anywhere near each other. Nikola Jokic, who we just watched win the finals, you know?
Nikola Jokic is actually good at defense, and people just don't think he's good at defense because he doesn't jump and try to block people out of the gym.
He is a liability, though. The point is, he's not a tremendous defender. Is the point that I'm trying to make. He's okay at very best. Now the thing is, Mike Malone has been able to scheme his defense into hiding Nikola Jokic. I just don't know if Tom Thibodeau is that type of guy. I feel like he relies so heavily on his drop coverage, on his center kind of just cleaning up the painted area. So I mean, although Karl Anthony Towns might be the best player of those, do you think that he would be a good fit on today's Knicks roster?
Well, Tibbs get him to play defense. I mean, or else he's not going to play. You know, Tibbs will get some of that. I think Joker gets a bad rap. I think he's better than people realize defensively.
But he's not good.
He's actually not bad.
The thing is that, you know, he understands. It's just like offense. Like, he understands angles. He understands where he needs to get to make it a little more difficult. Yeah, he's not going to block a million shots, but the one thing that he does, he gets every defensive rebound. I mean, that's how he gets offensive rebounds, but he gets 15, 20 rebounds because he cleans up every defensive rebound. So, and that's how you finish a possession. I mean, you have to stop somebody, and then you have to get the ball. So, like, he does really well in that spot. But yeah, I think, look, it's just two totally different styles of how you want to play. You want to try to put out a defensive team that's going to stop people. And by the way, that's Tibbs. I mean, that was when he was coaching with the Celts and, you know, Garnett and Rondo and that team. They were holding guys to 65, 70 points. Tibbs was running the defense in Boston. You know, same type of thing. He goes to Chicago, Minnesota. He's trying to hold teams to 80, 90. You know, so how do you want to play? I mean, do you want to try to play with pace and score 110 and try to be Sacramento? Or do you want to try to stop people and, you know, and then put the ball in Brunson's hands and a couple other guys that can get a bucket? So it's just it's really a matter of like strategy and scheme. And if you told me, hey, this is how we want to try to play, then you could put the pieces together a lot more easily.
For sure.
BJ, we actually did something last week that we wanted to ask you, because Jamal Murray obviously just won the NBA title. He's a phenomenal point guard, and it took him 2 years to get back from an ACL injury, which, given his age, it was actually a concern for people. Like, would he ever get back to where he was? But thankfully, because of his age, it was like, well, he was able to fully recover at this point. We were having a game last week where we were trying to rank Jalen Brunson versus other point guards. Obviously, recency bias is probably going to have Jamal Murray be first in this scenario of these 3 guys, but maybe not. Rank first to third in your head if you were an NBA team, who do you want for the next 4 years? Jalen Brunson, Jamal Murray, De'Aaron Fox. They're all very close, regardless of what you say. So, I mean,
no, they are. Obviously, Murray just did it. You know, and by the way, Murray averaged 10 assists a game, so he definitely made some plays. That's a tough one. You know, I don't know. I guess you got to say Murray because he just did it. But, like, I could see Brunson doing it. I really can. I just go with Brunson to have some fun here, because I just think, I mean, the guy just has so much guts. He's so gutty. I mean, he just, I could see, you know, we were talking about the Knicks a lot going into this playoffs, and we were just kind of like, you know, are they gonna show that they're good, but they just sort of don't make it like usual. And a lot of people I talked to around the game, we all just felt like, because of Brunson, it feels different. It just feels like
Yes, sir.
they have the chance. They have the chance to do it. And I think when you have a guy that can, and his teammates feed off that also. Like they know he wants the ball in a big spot, and that he's probably going to deliver. And he won in school, right? Like he won in college. So like if you told me that Jalen Brunson is going to help deliver a championship here for the Knicks, first one in a very long time, like I could see that. I can see that. I don't want to get crazy, but like if you told me it happened, I wouldn't be shocked. And the question is really just the stuff we're talking about is what are the best pieces to try to put around him and that he can make better and that also can help him, get to the point we're talking about. So I'll go with Brunson. I think Fox is great. He's so fast. He's a great scorer, great ability defensively when he's on to be a ball stopper at that one, which is hard to find.
Great
And
fourth
Murray
quarter
obviously
player.
just did it, but yeah. But I always loved Brunson. I loved him at Villanova. I mean, I'm old enough. I watched his dad play for the Knicks too. I mean, I watched Rick play at Temple. That's how old I am. So, and it's terrible because all these guys that I watched now, all their kids are playing. So it's like I feel so old watching all the time. But like, I just see the lineage, and like I said, I would not be shocked if he got them to the promised land.
BJ, I don't know how old you are, obviously, but you have great hair, but you look great, man. You have great skin. I wouldn't think you're over 35.
Thank you. Well, I'm 48 and
Did not see that coming.
So 50's right around the corner, which is crazy.
God bless, man. Good stuff.
Cool.
Thank you. Thank you.
I want to try to keep this inside a minute. I'll be completely transparent with you. We want to probably put it on like the TikToks and the Reels and stuff like that. So this is going to be really fun.
Okay.
If Jalen Brunson and Jamal Murray were to swap places this season, how far do the Knicks get? How far do the Nuggets get? Go.
Wow, that's a great question.
If you don't go fast, we can cut it, but yeah.
I would think this. I wouldn't think it would make that big a difference. I think Jokic was ready to win. I think he, and I think the pieces around him. Gordon was great. I think if you put Brunson on the Nuggets, they win. And I think if you put Murray on the Knicks, I think they probably end up in a similar spot.
You think it's still the same second round exit?
Yeah, I mean the Knicks obviously didn't have enough. I mean they didn't have enough. They weren't deep enough. Miami was deeper. Miami just outplayed them. Outworked them in spots. And would Murray have gotten them through that? I'm not sure.
If anything, actually, I think Murray would have made us be a first round exit because Murray, it took him like 2/3 of the year to actually get finally back to where he was leg spot wise. I think I would actually, so to go to the thing we were talking about before, I ranked them last week. Fox first, Brunson second, Murray third. And the thing is now Murray's won a title, so it's probably had it flip. But the thing with the Knicks is that Murray it didn't seem like he was good until like February, March. So we probably would have been a lower seed, and I would have expected us to have a better, worse chance of winning in the first round. But I think they're equal talents overall, if that makes sense.
I think Murray, very easily could have been a first round exit. I don't know if that team is necessarily better than Jalen's just a dog, so whatever. Maybe I'm biased. I
think it's because of the ACL thing, not because of their talent differential.
That too. Last question. I know I sent you our reel from last week as well, but I just kind of wanted your take in person, and then we'll call it quits. Who's a better player today, Jalen Brunson or Kyrie Irving?
Man, that's another tough one. I mean, they're both. Listen, Kyrie's a Hall of Famer, and Brunson's probably going to get there, especially if he can win one here. I think it's like beauty is in the eye. I mean, watching Kyrie offensively when he's on, it's like poetry. I heard a guy once say that about Colbey. Like watching Colbey is like poetry. And Kyrie, man, it's like he's like a conductor in an orchestra. The way he's able to, nobody's ever had the handle and the finishing ability. And when he's on with the shooting and scoring and stuff. But Brunson, give me Brunson because again, what are we trying to do? Are we trying to win a championship? And look, Kyrie did it. Kyrie did it with LeBron, and he made it. He made huge shots, and so he did it. Okay, but going forward, give me Brunson, give me the leadership. Give me the dog at the end of the game, like you said, Brad. Give me the onions. I'll take the onions every time.
I love that. BJ, last question for you on my end, and then we'll wrap it up. And then you also plug yourself and anything you want to plug after this. Do you think the Knicks trade into the draft on June 22nd in any way?
I have no idea. I have no inside scoop or anything.
Come on, you spoke to Walt Perrin.
I mean, they could always, it's not like, they have the money. They could buy a second round pick if they really wanted to.
Yeah.
It's a question of, do they find a guy that they really love, that they think they can get? A lot of second round guys are going on 2 ways now. So maybe they feel like they could find a guy that they could put into a 2-way spot. But again, I don't like, Tibbs not going to prioritize that. Like, he doesn't care about, look how difficult it was for, Grimes and McBride and all these other guys, even Obi, to get in the rotation consistently. Yeah. Tibbs is going to err on the side, we all know, of playing vets and, known quantities. And so, do they put a lot of importance on buying into the second round? Probably not. But if they find a guy that they love, they certainly could. I just think, when I tell my guys this, and I know we're going to wrap, but in order to make the league with a lot of these NBA coaches, it's not about how good you are. It's not. It's about not screwing up.
Right.
It's about coach knowing that he's going to put you in the game, that you're going to make the right reads defensively, that you're not going to turn the ball over, that if you get an open corner 3, you're going to make it. You're a known quantity. I know what I'm going to get if I put you on the floor. The guys that have this huge upside, but the coaches don't know what they're going to get from night to night, that's where the coaches say, that's a guy that's going to get me fired. And they're inclined to play the guys. Even if he's a lesser talent, you know what you're going to get.
For everyone that's in New York, I know we're not Nets fans, but that just sounds like Cam Thomas through and through, which is why this guy can go off for 40 multiple games in a row and then not play for 2 weeks straight.
I love Cam.
Well, that could also be they don't want to pay him too.
That's fair.
But that's the age. That's me putting my age in.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Brad, anything else you want to say before we let BJ go?
No, man, this was great. Again, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure. It's always a lot of fun, kind of be able to pick your brain. And I'm excited. Listen, if any of these guys end up on the Knicks, you know I'm contacting you. So just be prepared.
No, I'll be back. You guys are great, and it's a lot of fun always. And anytime I can talk Knicks, I'm always happy to.
BJ, thank you so much for coming on. Again, for everyone, make sure to like, share, subscribe, and comment everywhere you can find our podcast, our Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, all that good stuff. Let's go Knicks. Hopefully Colbey Ross and Rokas Jokubaitis are both actually on the roster this year. Peace.
Sounds good to me.